What's up, y'all? It's your boy Heaven Hollywood for the IE Network, and this is the Heaven Hollywood Report. And let's get into it, man. Is the Joe Budden podcast over? This is the truth behind what happened over at the Joe Budden podcast. Now, as you may know, if you are a listener and a follower of the Joe Budden podcast, you will know that it has just been Joe Budden, and the last few weeks, it has been a lot of tension. The last couple of episodes has just been Joe Budden with, I believe, whatever his name is, Saquon or whatever his name is, and then they got Parks is still there, Erickson, and I believe his name is, but Mal and Rory has allegedly went on strike. Now, the moment that you hear on strike, what does that sound like to you? Why do people usually go on strike? It's either not feeling as though they're respected, not feeling as though they're valued, and 99.9% of the time, why do they not feel as though they're respected or valued? Because of the money. Joe Budden can sit up and tell people and tell the crowd and tell the world all he wants about how this is not about money. So when Parks said there's also some PTSD about the business part, what does that sound like? What does that sound like? When Joe said, when the business talk outweighs the friendship, then there's a problem. So, what is the business talk? Money. Now, let's just be clear. Joe Budden did several hundred shows, or maybe not hundreds, but he did, 70, 80 shows maybe? Without Mal and Rory. Well, maybe not that many. He did a few. He was by himself, then I think he had some girl with him for a while. Then he went back by himself, and then I think he brought on Mal and Rory. I don't know how many they've had together, but Joe Budden pretty much created the Joe Budden podcast by himself. Now, as the show started to grow, Rory and Mal bounced things off of Joe. They got them there personally so he can, have them there to bounce things off of and debate and what have you. And then they, Parks went from being really behind the scenes, saying a word or two every now and then, to then he became a part of the show. And then Savon, I believe his name is, kind of took Parks' slot of just being behind the scenes, producing, saying one or two words every now and then. And then they started, in my opinion, giving Parks too many lines. I mean, I can't. I really do not like hearing Parks talk. His voice is annoying. He sounds like just the voice annoys me. All right? He never really has anything enlightening. He's just going to agree with, I agree. I agree. I agree. I agree. That's fair. I agree. That's fair. I agree. That's not bringing anything to a podcast. So recently, it's been reported that Rory and Mal went on strike. Well, actually, Rory was asked by Joe Budden himself to take a couple of podcasts off. Now, what I like to do is listen to the lingo and listen to the dialogue, all right, in between, and listen to the things that was said. Now, I have noticed for a while Rory talking over Joe, which they do a lot. Rory does it way more than Mal. Talking over Joe, making wise cracks at Joe. I know they crack on each other, and Joe says they're his nearest and dearest friends, and you should be able to joke on each other when you're friends and what have you. I get all that. But I started noticing a change. Joe has them as like, let me just say this. All right? We're going to have to be real here. And I'm going to be real. People are out here, now that Rory and Mal have not showed up, people have the nerve to say they won't listen to the Joe Budden podcast unless Rory and Mal are there. So this is called the Joe Budden podcast. This is not called the Friends podcast. This is not called Joe, Rory, and Mal. Okay? This is called the Joe Budden podcast. All right? It's kind of like when Wendy Williams was on and she had Charlemagne and Skeletor there with her. But it was still Wendy's show. And when stuff got thick, what happened? Wendy fired people. This is Joe Budden's show. So for people to say Joe treats them with no respect, Joe treats them as though Joe bosses them and don't treat him as an equal. They're not. They're not Joe's equal. It's the same thing with the Howard Stern show. And Howard Stern had his sidekick, Robin Quivers, or whatever her name was. Remember that, people? That was his sidekick, Robin. When Angela Yee had lip service, that was her show. But then she brought in some co-hosts. But that was Angela Yee's podcast. Let's get into this. Joe Budden is trending after he revealed his podcast co-host Rory and Mal might not return. Looks like things over at the Joe Budden podcast aren't going well right now, and fans of the show are definitely concerned. After noticing the absence of Rory and Mal from the show for the past few weeks, Joe Budden spoke about some tension that has been growing between the co-hosts. Joe says he suggested Rory take a few shows off after he challenged him to his hands for 6 weeks in a row. That is your boss. I don't care if he's your friend. That is your boss. Would you challenge your boss at work to the hands and expect to still have a job after? Let's move on. Joe went on to say that Rory and Mal would return when the time is right, but fans aren't too happy about not hearing them on the show. What? So, let me get this straight. This is the podcast that Joe Budden created and built, right? He brought in Rory and Mal. It's not like they were always there. It's not like Rory and Mal contribute to the show. I'm sorry, they do not. Joe can go and put any two people there, and in due time, you will forget about Rory or Mal. You're going to tell me that show wouldn't be more enlightening, more entertaining with Joe and Ack? Don't worry, I'll wait. So you're going to tell me if Joe Budden and Academics got back together, that show wouldn't be better, more enlightening, and more entertaining than Rory and Mal with Joe? You guys have to be joking. So for people to say, we're not going to watch the show if he doesn't bring Rory and Mal back, this is Joe Budden's show. I'm sorry. I go along with Joe Budden. I read a couple of blogs. People were stating that, they're riding with Rory and Mal. So if Rory and Mal is the reason why you listen to Joe Budden, let them two go out and get their own podcast and let's see their numbers. The first show would be heavy numbers because people are just going to tune in for the tea and they're going to want to see what Rory and Mal have to say about Joe Budden. So for the first 2 weeks, yeah, the numbers will probably battle Joe's. And because Joe's already spoke on it, their numbers might even be bigger than Joe's. But this is the Joe Budden podcast. And if Joe wants to say it's not about money, well then why are there rumors that Rory is going around complaining to people about the money Joe pays him? And when he left the Spotify deal, he pretty much did it for selfish reasons and pretty much left them out in the cold because after Spotify, he wasn't really getting a check. He then took on a job at Patreon. Spotify offered millions. He didn't take it, $10 million or what have you. If he was to get the $10 million, Rory and Mal figured, hey, maybe we'll get $1 million. Maybe he'll give us $1 million. So he got the Patreon job where he has an actual position at Patreon. And then there's rumors, just rumors floating around that Rory and Mal are complaining saying Joel's riding in luxury cars and they're only riding in Ubers. It's the Joe Budden podcast. And certain rumors about them only making $50,000 combined a year, $25,000 a piece. Guess what? Making $25,000 a year just coming to a podcast 2 days a week and getting to talk about celebrities and listen to music and you're getting different perks and whatnot. I'll take that. If all I had to do was come and run my mouth and not say and not add much to Joe's points, and I'm sorry, I don't know what you people are watching, but those two without Joe on a podcast, I've seen that. I've seen that already. No, thank you. And you're going to tell me that you're not going to watch it if Rory and Mal don't come back. Give me a break. It's Joe's show. Joe called the shots. Now, it started going downhill when Joe really didn't come to Rory's defense when Academics put his relationship on blast and exposed Rory having a side chick, and it ended up Rory losing his relationship. Now, Joe probably should have been more supportive of Rory, but he still continued his relationship with Academics, and that made Rory feel some type of way. Let's just get to it. That's the real tea. That's the real tea. Joe still deals with Academics after Academics pretty much ruined Rory's life, ruined his relationship, put a lot of his business on blast, and Joe still talks to Academics after he disrespects Rory and Mal daily. And the money. Don't tell me when the business talks gets bigger than the friendship, then it's a problem. Well, what are the business talks? The money. Oh, man. We'll see what happens. A lot of people think this is actually just a rollout. You know, everybody thinks that everything's a conspiracy theory these days. So a lot of people think, this is just a rollout. They'll be back. People, they just want to get, because the numbers have been dropping since they left Spotify, and they're just trying to get, spark everything back up. I always said Joe should have took the 10 million. Nice. It was, very gutsy if you do what you did, but man, take the guarantee money. Take the 10 mil, bro. So we're going to check it back out. My point is, I could care less if Rory or Mal never came back. That is the Joe Budden podcast. That's Joe Budden show, and Joe is the star, the draw, and the boss. So who gives him the right to tell Rory to go home, Mal? Joe gives himself the right. He's the boss. It's his show. What is wrong with you? It's your boy Heaven Hollywood. For the IE Network, please like, comment, and subscribe. Share this video with your friends.